Cargo ships are sitting idle. Ports from Shanghai to California are jammed. Amazon is canceling orders mid-transit. And China, it's not talking, it's pulling levers. What you're watching isn't a trade dispute. It's a precision-engineered shutdown of America's supply lines. And where does it hit hardest? At the checkout counter, in your next car payment, and across every American industry. On April 3, 2025, the Chinese government issued a low-profile directive to all state-affiliated airlines, suspend new Boeing deliveries indefinitely. No televised declaration, no accusations, just silence, and a freeze that wipes $28.4 billion off Boeing's valuation in 48 hours, according to Bloomberg. The halt affected 84 aircraft scheduled for delivery in Q2 and Q3, including models from the 737 and 787 Dreamliner families. Orders that Boeing had publicly relied on to stabilize its post-COVID backlog. But this wasn't about aircraft specs, according to a leaked Chinese Ministry of Commerce memo obtained by the South China Morning Post. The move was a calibrated response to hostile U.S. tariff escalations. Boeing, once the crown jewel of American exports, now faces its steepest international drop in 2 decades. This isn't just a trade response, said Scott Kennedy from CSIS. It's a pressure campaign targeting a vulnerable U.S. symbol. Meanwhile, Airbus shares jumped 11.2% in Frankfurt as Chinese airlines pivoted. But why strike Boeing first? Because in trade wars, symbolism sells, and Boeing represents American industrial dominance. The message wasn't shouted, it was implied. Keep escalating, and we'll pick your weak spots clean. But this tactical freeze wasn't just about planes. The real damage was waiting in the water. On April 1st, the Trump administration triggered a 145% import tariff on over $300 billion in Chinese goods, a move that the Wall Street Journal likened to turning a policy weapon into a wrecking ball. By April 4th, port traffic data from marine traffic showed outbound Chinese shipments to the U.S. had dropped 47% week over week. The Shanghai International Port Group reported over 71,000 containers stranded, some for over 10 days. As cargo began stacking in Ningbo and Shenzhen, West Coast ports buckled. At the Port of Los Angeles, berth congestion climbed to its highest since the 2021 pandemic-era surge, with 27 vessels waiting off the coast and unloading delays averaging 96 hours. The price of a 40-foot container from China to Long Beach jumped from $1,950 to $6,820 in 10 days. A 250% increase, according to the Freightos Baltic Index. But this wasn't just about congestion, it was about decisions. Chinese shippers began pausing contracts mid-negotiation, citing tariff instability. You can't price a shipment when the rules are changing mid-ocean, said Zhang Qiming, a director at Sinotrans Logistics. The U.S. intended to pressure Beijing, but ended up choking its own trade arteries. And once cargo stops moving, it isn't just retailers that suffer. By April 6th, China's top 5 freight forwarders, including ZTO and Costco Shipping, suspended most bookings bound for the U.S., citing liability exposure related to retroactive tariff enforcement. But the real reason may lie in the numbers. Exporters faced the impossible choice of shipping under uncertain conditions or eating losses they couldn't recoup. In Dongguan, a city responsible for nearly 8% of Chinese electronics exports, over 1,200 small-scale factories were reported idle by April 10th, according to the China Federation of Logistics and Purchasing. One supplier of power banks for Five Below and Target shared with Caixin Global. Our goods are packaged, labeled, and sitting in port. But the freight company canceled. We don't even know if they'll move this month. This paralysis isn't theoretical. U.S. Customs data from the first half of April shows a 34% plunge in inbound manifests from China compared to March. For the average American consumer, the shelves may look normal today, but the vacuum is already in motion. And it's not just small boxes that are vanishing. The fallout is hitting the biggest names in retail. On April 7th, internal memos at Amazon's Global Supply Chain Division advised U.S. sellers to pause all incoming shipments from mainland China pending tariff recalibrations and warehousing space reassessments. Just 36 hours later, Five Below publicly confirmed it canceled over $67 million in product orders already en route, roughly 11% of its second quarter inventory flow, according to its SEC filing. CEO Joel Anderson stated during an April 9th earnings call, "We couldn't justify paying 3 times the landed cost on items already facing margin pressure. This shift is bigger than a spreadsheet. It's a panic move from companies that rely on low-cost, high-volume cycles. Canceling in transit costs money, but selling tariff-inflated goods to bargain hunters costs customer trust. And the timing couldn't be worse." U.S. consumer sentiment fell to 75.1 in April, the lowest since mid-2022, according to the University of Michigan Index. With back-to-school shipments disrupted and summer inventories frozen, retailers are now gambling on domestic alternatives. But how long before those gambles turn into defaults? The worst part? This isn't about novelty items anymore. It's now hitting the engines of U.S. manufacturing. By April 11th, Ford's Wayne, Michigan plant halted assembly on its flagship F-150 Lightning due to missing microcontrollers sourced from Shenzhen. GM's battery module production at its Spring Hill, Tennessee facility slowed by 60% after capacitors and inverter components failed to arrive. According to Auto Forecast Solutions, nearly 41,000 vehicles were lost in U.S. production during the second week of April alone, amounting to $1.6 billion in delayed revenue. Meanwhile, Stellantis issued a statement warning that supply chain constraints related to tariff policy are likely to affect output through June. The auto sector doesn't operate on weeks, it runs on hours. And when just one part goes missing, 2,000 workers can get sent home. "You can't run a modern assembly line without a $12 chip," said Kristen Zichek, a policy analyst with the Center for Automotive Research. The average U.S.-built vehicle contains at least 24 components still sourced from China, despite ongoing diversification. With freight delays compounding daily, some U.S. plants have begun cannibalizing units for parts, a move not seen since early COVID disruptions. But this isn't COVID. This is geopolitical strategy, and if the White House can't stabilize imports, the next auto shortage may not be temporary, it may be structural. Between April 1st and April 14th, the cost of shipping a 40-foot container from China to the U.S. surged from $2,000 to over $7,300, according to the Freightos Baltic Index. That spike is now cascading through every layer of auto pricing. Stellantis, which imports over 23% of its EV components from Chinese ports, raised average dealer prices on its plug-in hybrid line by 6.8% within 1 week, citing unrecoverable transport volatility. The Ford Mustang Mach-E saw a $1,200 MSRP hike after freight contracts were renegotiated mid-transit. Even used vehicles aren't immune. Cox Automotive reported that wholesale prices rose 4.1% week over week in mid-April, the sharpest uptick since the 2021 chip crisis. But this isn't inflation by coincidence. It's logistics converted into leverage. Every delay, every price hike, every missing part, it's a direct byproduct of rerouted cargo and tariff confusion. And here's where it stings most. U.S. dealerships are beginning to reduce inventory by as much as 30% to avoid absorbing those inflated costs, according to an April 17th CNBC dealer survey. If you think sticker shock peaked during the pandemic, brace yourself. This is what pricing looks like when the supply chain breaks on purpose. But let's ask a deeper question. Can these price pressures even be reversed? Or is this the new cost of doing business in a fractured trade world?